Hi, I'm Jamie. Welcome to the world of Korean cuisine. So, this is tteokguk. Tteokguk is traditional rice cake soup that Koreans eat on first day of New Year. The ingredients we need are very simple. I'm gonna do a very simple version, but it does take time if you want to make a proper thick stock. First of all, you need brisket. This is about 300 grams, and this is also about 300 grams of the marrow bones. Then you have the rice cake itself. You can buy this from Asian supermarkets. You need to get the sliced ones, not the chewy ones. This is the big chewy one sliced, and this is what you have. It's about 500 grams. This one, full portion, will serve about 3 to 4 people. But for small portion sample sizes, obviously a lot more. We need egg for garnish later, as well as spring onions for garnish. We're gonna season the soup with soup soy sauce. This is not your normal soy sauce. Please make sure you use Korean soy sauce and sesame seed oil. Otherwise the taste would not be the same. And also as a garnish on top later on, this is seasoned roasted seaweed. You can buy any brand. I quite like this one. It has a nice salty texture, and salt and pepper. With the bones, if you want to do it proper way, you need to boil this for about 5 to 6 hours. If you haven't got time, you can do without the bones and just do with brisket for about an hour and a half to make a broth. And I'll show you how. So now the bones, I've washed them and put them into a bowl and soaking it in cold water. Let them sit for about 30 minutes until the blood is a bit drawn and it's a little bit clearer. Then you wash them off and put them into a saucepan or pot. Fill it up a fair bit of water, cover it. I would say double, three times the size of the amount of the bones, and boil it on low heat, medium to low heat, for about 5 to 6 hours. You'll know when it's done when the broth is quite milky in color or whitish. As for the brisket here, if you're not going with the bone option, this brisket is for 2 people, full-size portion that we're making today, which is half the packet of the rice cake that I showed you earlier. You can obviously have more brisket if you don't want to use the bone broth. So with the brisket, cut away all the fat as much as possible, and then only boil the meat. You can leave some fat in for taste, but as it cooks, it melts, and you have to skim the fat off anyway. So best to cut them all out. So and make it not so thick, because as it cooks, it needs to cook fairly quick. It's quite fatty, this one. There you go. We're ready to cook. Now we're ready to make the stock. Very simple brisket stock. Add to that about 350 grams of brisket. Add 3 cups of water. That's 2 cups there. And there's another cup there. You want to make sure the meat is immersed. Bring it to boil. Start with a bit of a medium heat. Don't want to overboil this one. You can cover. And once it starts to boil, bring the heat a little bit low, and you let it boil for about an hour to 2 hours, depending on whether the meat is cooked, and the broth, that you can actually taste that it's broth. So while the broth is being made, we're gonna soak the rice cake in water for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then you have to drain. You can't keep it in the water. And then we set aside until we're ready to put it into the broth once it's ready. So make sure it's soaked right through. Yeah. Now we're gonna prepare, while we're waiting for everything, we're gonna prepare the egg. You crack one egg, one's enough. Add a bit of salt, and then you whisk it. You can use a fork, chopsticks, whatever you prefer. It doesn't have to be completely mixed. It doesn't matter if you have a bit of yellow or white color as you cook it. And then now we pan fry. You should sizzle. Okay. As it cooks, make it as thin as possible if you can. So once it's bubbling away and you can do this and the egg moves around, let it cook just a little bit more, and then we can flip. I think I'll do, wee. There you go. You let it cook. So the spring onions, it's only for garnish. So you chop the head off, discard. You can make it into small chunks, and then you slice them diagonally for nice shape. Make it as thin as possible so that when you pour the hot broth, when you put this on top of the hot broth, it cooks a little bit. You don't want it raw, otherwise it gets very hot and a little bit bitter. That's it. Now the eggs have been cooked, what you do is, to make it be easier, cut it in half. That's okay. Make it really thin. It's meant to be garnish, like so, like little strings, like little noodles. Set them aside. Now the bone broth, as you can see, it's white in color. That's what you want. This has been boiling for about 6.5 hours now. We'll skim out the fat. You can add a bit more water so there's a bit more broth, and boil it for another 30 minutes, and I think we're done. So now it's been boiling for an hour. It's cooked. I've just turned the heat down. What we need to do, you can see there's a bit of broth happening there. If you want the meat to be softer, you can cook a bit longer, but it's not necessary because I quite like slight chewiness. So we take the meat out, put it into a bowl, then we pour cold water in and let it sit. This will make it slightly, the texture will just make it a bit nicer. And let that sit. And this is actually now ready for the rice cakes. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer the broth from the bones that we've been making into here and let it boil once. So, there you go. Okay, now let's check the broth. So, it's been boiling for a while. And you can see the fat. You can skim out the fat with the spoon. Just skim the top, like so. Now the fat's been skimmed. These are the rice cakes that I drained earlier. While the broth is boiling, place them in. Make sure you only cook this not long before you have to serve, because it doesn't take very long for these to cook. How do we know when these are cooked? When they float to the top. So let them boil. See how they sunk at the moment? When they're fully cooked, as they boil, they'll come up to the surface and start to float. While we're waiting for this to boil, we can prepare the beef and just slice them. Now we season with soy sauce, just a little bit, because the main seasoning should just be salt. So salt and pepper. Now that you can see the rice cakes have floated, so we serve. You don't want to put too much soup, because mainly it's actually the rice cake that's the star dish. And now you garnish. This is obviously a very small portion, just to show you. You add a bit of the meat, a little bit of, and you add a bit of spring onions. That should cook. And sprinkle this. You can make it a little smaller, make like a little dust. And there you have it. Tteokguk. Happy New Year. I hope you found the video helpful. Now you give it a try and let me know.